Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to today's lecture. So today what we are going to do is we are going to cover rest of the chapter 3 and we'll try to start chapter 4. Okay. So in last lecture we were discussing about using the work of internal auditors. Okay. Wherein we discussed about when we can rely upon the work performed by the internal audit. So remember we discussed about two proposals that management gave us, whether we can rely upon whatever work that has been performed by internal audit. Second, whether we can take the direct assistance from the internal audit. There people can work with us for us. Remember something from last lecture? Okay. So based on that, we discussed about to what extent we can rely, we need to understand, and for that three areas: organizational status and policy, level of competency of internal audit function, and systematic and discipline approach. If any of the three is missing, we cannot rely upon the work to be performed by the internal audit or has been performed by the internal audit. Okay, clear till here? Now let's continue. So we discussed about to what extent. Okay, but there is one more area that we need to understand. We also need to understand in which area. So to what extent we understood. Okay, like whether yes or no, that we understood. Now in which area, that is something we need to understand. So we divided whether to rely upon the work performed by the internal auditor. For that we said whether yes or no. If yes, then to what extent and in which area. So for yes, we discussed these 3 points. Now to what extent and in which area, let's discuss like what are the points that guides us or that are important with respect to whether I can use the work of internal audit in this area to that extent. Okay. For example, I'll ask you a simple question. In last lecture we discussed about proposal 1, wherein the internal audit team did the testing for the purchase. Okay. Now taking the same example, you instead of testing purchase, management is saying please use the testing of purchase done by internal audit team. Now I will ask a question to you. If you want to use this particular testing that is done by the internal audit team in purchasing area, to what extent you can take the testing, and in which area you can take the testing or rely the work performed by internal auditor, in which area and to what extent. Considering this proposal 1 as an example, you guys tell me in which area you can rely upon the work performed by internal auditor. Number 2, to what extent. Come on guys, consider this simple proposal 1 example. Come on guys, quickly. In this scenario, okay, in proposal 1, let's assume you want to rely upon the work that has been performed by internal audit team. Okay. Uh, to what extent, in which area you will rely? Come on quickly. Okay. If I have to rely, I will rely upon the work that is performed by the internal audit team only to the extent that is performed in purchase area. Okay, and to the extent of the samples, basically. Like, if say for example, uh, they have tested already, how much? Three samples in this area example. So I would only, focus upon those three samples. Okay. I won't rely. Let's say, for example, I have an, I need to test more samples. Okay. Wherein what I will do is instead of, relying upon totally internal audit team, I will rely to the extent they have performed the work, and for the rest of the things or rest of the area, I will myself perform the work. Are you getting my point? So to that extent, I will only rely that the internal audit team has performed the work. For those areas only, I will rely where they have performed the work. And let's say, for example, they have performed or tested three samples. Then I will understand what was my requirement and whether three samples are sufficient or not. In the same way, whenever I have to rely upon the work to be performed by internal audit team, okay, I need to understand few things. Number one, if yes to the question one, that okay, I can rely upon the work that is performed by internal audit. If yes to that, then I need to understand, okay, to what extent and in which area. So to what extent is something, coming from your audit plan. This is based on the audit plan. And audit program. That what test you want to do and what test internal audit team has done. So to what extent will help you to identify, okay, I want this much comfort, but I can only get this comfort from the internal audit team. Okay. So for that, this is based on the audit plan and audit program of external auditor and the nature, timing and extent, nature, timing and extent of work performed or to be performed by internal audit team. Okay. So I need to understand what work they are going to perform or what work they have performed. And I will compare that with my audit plan in order to understand, okay, let's say for example, they are going to test three samples. Is that sufficient for me? I wanted 300 samples. So how much reliance I can place? I can place reliance to the extent of only three samples. That's it. Rest of 297 samples I have to still test. So in that way itself, okay, to what extent is something based on the audit program or audit plan that I prepare as an external auditor, plus what work the internal audit is going to do is dependent on them. Okay. Now, this was to what extent. Now, to in which area, that is very important. In which area I can rely upon the work to be performed by internal auditor. Okay, you tell me, instead of there could be lot many areas where I can rely upon the work performed by internal auditor, but let's go other way around. Let's prepare a negative list where work of IA should not be used. This would be much simpler because if I prepare a list wherein I mention all the areas of the areas where I can rely upon the work that might be performed by the internal auditor. In that case, the list would be a big, huge list with a lot of items in that, because there are not many areas where I can rely upon the work of internal audit. Rather than that, let's prepare a negative list where there's a no for relying upon the work that is performed by the internal audit. Now you tell me such areas where you think, okay, I should not be relying upon the work that is performed by the internal audit team. Come on, guys. So you tell me some areas where you think I shouldn't be relying upon the work that is performed by internal audit. Come on, guys. Which are those areas where you think that I should not be relying upon the work that is performed or going to be performed by internal audit team? Any answers? Anyone? Salesh, Viraj, areas where you think you shouldn't be relying upon the work that is performed by the internal audit team? Okay, can I say, I'll write it few areas. Number one, can I say areas where there's a significant judgment involved? Significant professional judgment involved. Now, if there is a significant professional judgment involved, then why I say it is not supposed to be given to internal audit team? Anyone? Why I am saying this is not supposed to be given to internal audit team? Where I say there is a significant judgments involved. Let's say, for example, judgment. Sorry. Let's say, for example, uh, sorry, apologies. Let's say, for example, judgment regarding planning and performing audit procedures, judgment regarding evaluating the audit evidence gathered. So I'm saying I shouldn't be relying upon the internal audit in significant professional judgment areas. For example, where the judgment is involving regarding planning and performing the audit procedures or evaluating the audit evidence gathered. Because first, lack of competency, correct, Mohammed. Number two, there is a risk factor. Very good, Salish. Okay. Over and above that, when I say planning and performing and significant professional judgment, so judgment of the external auditor, your judgment is required. If I delegate the judgment taking authority or judgment taking, areas to internal audit, then what I will do? That is something is on to me. Significant professional judgment is my judgment. Like let's say planning. I have to decide what I have to test during the planning, during the performance stage. I will drop the whole audit planning, whether to rely upon the work of internal audit or not. Even if I delegate that to internal audit, then what I will be doing. These are the critical areas that I should not be giving it to the internal audit team. Number two, where there is a higher risk of material misstatement, higher the assessed risk of material misstatement at assertion level. Okay. So if there is a higher risk of material misstatement, means that area is very much critical. And those critical areas should be done by me, not by the internal audit team. Okay. Uh, Lesser areas to be given. Okay. Lesser areas to be given to internal audit team when the org status and relevant policies the org status and relevant policies support less support less the objectivity of IA. Remember, in last lecture also we discussed about the org status and relevant policies. So when the org status and relevant policies are supporting less than the required, in that point in time also you need to give lesser areas. I will give lesser areas when the competency of IA is lower. If the competency level of IA is lower, then I will give them less areas. Okay. So kind of a negative list where I should not be giving or when I should not be giving the work to the internal audit team. So kind of a negative list. So other than this, everything I think should be fine. But in a way of negative list, we are covering areas which are critical and required to be done by the external auditor and should not be delegated to internal audit. Any doubt? Any doubt, guys? Okay. If no doubts, so to what extent we understood, in which area we also understood that. Okay. Now we need to understand few more things. Just now we need to understand that okay, this is the area where to what extent and in which area is completed. So the first point that we were supposed to discuss, that can be used, and if so, then in which area and to what extent is done. Second is whether that work is adequate for the purpose of audit. We need to understand that whether the work is adequate for the purpose of audit. For that, we need to evaluate the work that is performed by the internal audit. We need to evaluate the work that is performed by the internal audit. And that is something required to be done uh, based on certain factors. Otherwise, it won't be possible for us to understand whether the work that is being performed by the internal audit is adequate or not. Let's say, for example, I wanted to rely upon the work of internal audit. Internal audit said, okay, I'll perform for you. So I decided in my audit plan, this is the area which will be done by internal audit and I will be getting this much comfort. So I decided, yes, can be used. Okay, can be used. In which area? Let's say, for example, purchasing area. To what extent? Let's say they will be testing 250 samples. Done, everything fine. Now, after, during execution, internal audit tested that particular area and provided reports to us. Now, once we will receive the reports, the second question, whether this report or the testing done by the internal audit team of 250 samples is adequate for me or not. Whether that is sufficient for me or not. So how will you understand, how will you identify whether the work that is being performed by the internal audit team is sufficient for you? So whether the work performed by internal audit team is adequate. How will you ensure this? Come on, guys. Some examples. How will you ensure that the work that is performed by the internal audit team is adequate for me? So how will you ensure this, guys? Come on. That the work which has been performed by the internal audit team has been performed appropriately or not, or whether that work is educately sufficient or for my reliance. Come on, guys. How will you ensure this? How will you ensure that the work that is performed by the internal audit team is adequate for my purpose? Good, Yedugonalu. So review the work that is performed by the internal audit and provide directions to IA. Okay, very good. That is the one thing. So what I will do when I will perform, I have to rely on the work that is performed by the internal audit, or I have to review. What I will do is number one, to understand whether that is adequate, I will review everything that is performed by the internal audit team. So how I will do? Number one, I will provide them the detail what they are required to do. Starting from that, okay, I will provide them the detail. Okay, this is the detail that you need to do, and then I will check whether that has been done appropriately or not. So first, I will communicate to them. Okay, that is this is the work that you are required to perform. This is the work that you should perform, or it is your responsibility from now onwards. That this is how I want. Okay, this is how I want. So everything will be, explained to internal audit. Or if internal audit has already performed, then I will understand how they have performed. So for that, what I need to do is I need to understand the work, okay, performed by IA or to be performed is or kind of, has been planned, performed, supervised, reviewed, and documented properly again. So if I want to rely upon the work that is performed by the internal audit team, I have to see whether the work has been planned properly, performed properly, supervised properly, reviewed properly within the internal audit function itself, and documented properly. If yes, okay, I can take a sigh of relief. Okay, I can now rely upon that is the work that is performed by the internal audit. Number two, what evidence has been obtained by testing that is being performed by internal audit? Whether that evidence is sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. If yes, then only I can consider that the testing performed by the internal audit team is adequate for me. So whether sufficient or an appropriate audit evidence had been obtained, okay, to draw conclusions. Number three, now these conclusions, okay, these conclusions, whether conclusions reached are appropriate and consistent with work performed by IA. Again, important point. Appropriate and consistent. I'm talking about the conclusions. Why? Reason because first of all, conclusion should be appropriate that has been issued in the area. Like, whether they are satisfied with the testing or not, whether they have identified any material misstatement. So whatever conclusion they have reached, whatever conclusion they have reached, that should be appropriate and consistent with the work performed. For example, while testing, they identified 7 to 8 samples where there was a material misstatement, and still they issued a conclusion, okay, there is no material misstatement. Then what? In that case, we need to understand whether the conclusions are appropriate and consistent, whether sufficient and appropriate audit evidence has been collected or obtained to draw conclusions, whether work performed is planned, performed, supervised, reviewed, documented properly. If yes, then only I can say, okay, now internal audit has done something where I can consider that adequate for my purpose. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt, guys? No? Okay. Now, once I do that, I will be able to, answer the question that whether the work performed by the internal audit team is adequate or not. Okay, so that is our second part of the this particular standard or requirement of the standard. So to accept the proposal, I need to understand if yes, I can accept the proposal, then in which areas to what extent. Number two, I need to understand whether the work that is performed by the internal audit is adequate for the audit purpose or not. That is also I understand. Third was the case with respect to the direct assistance. Third was the case with respect to the direct assistant. Now, in point number 1 also we understood whether the work of the internal auditor or direct assistant from internal auditor can be used. Now, we only saw area where we were relying upon the work of internal audit. Now, the point comes is with respect to the direct assistance. Okay. Direct assistance means internal audit team is working for you on your direction. They are testing for you. You are directly supervising them. In second, in the area that you are discussing till now, that relying upon the work performed by the internal audit. In that case, internal audit independently performs that work. So both is different. Both are different actually. Okay. So now the question comes is for the direct assistance also, I need to see whether yes to the direct assistance or not. Whether yes to direct assistance. How will you determine that? Whether you can go for direct assistance or not? Or which areas you will focus when you are, using the direct assistance from the internal audit team? Which areas you will focus upon? In order to decide whether yes to direct, whether you want to say yes to the direct assistance or not. Come on, guys. Which areas you will be looking into when you have to decide whether should I say yes to the direct assistance or not. Come on, guys. What points you will look for? Understand the difference between both. In one, when I say I am going to use the work of internal audit, that means internal audit independently is going to perform that work. That's why I am reviewing this particular all these points, that how they plan the work, how they perform the work, how who supervised the work, who reviewed the work, who doc and how they have documented the work. That is the thing I am checking when I want to use the work of internal audit. But when I talk about direct assistance, is that I am planning the work, I am supervising the work, I am reviewing the work, and they are documenting the work according to me, not independently. So, if you want to take direct assistance from the internal audit function, how will you take? Like, if in order to decide yes or no, what are the factors that you consider? Come on, guys, which are the factors that you will consider? Okay. If I have to consider the factors, I will be saying, okay, I will understand whether are there any threats, are there any significant threats to the objectivity of internal audit function. Number one. Number two, I need to consider whether the internal audit function or internal auditor lacks sufficient competency to perform the work. Why? Reason because by understanding these two areas, I will be able to understand whether they would be able to work under my supervision, my direction or not. Okay. So here I will be understanding that okay, whether they can work under my supervision or not. Let's say yes to this. Let's say, for example, if you say yes, okay, they can do the work. Okay, they are fine to do the work. Now the second question comes, to what extent and in which area? Now the first is to what extent. The involvement of the internal audit function. Okay, the involvement of internal audit function to what extent in my testing is something I need to understand. I need to see what is to what extent, okay, I can take the direct assistance from the internal audit function. And to understand that, again, I need to see, okay, I need to see the amount of judgment involved. in planning and performing the work. Number two, evaluating the audit evidence gathered. See, in direct assistance, I need to understand whether the in direct assistance, what will be the scenario is, let's say, for example, three from the internal audit team, three people from internal audit team will now work with me. Okay, kind of a guest auditor. So if they are working with me as an, with the external auditor, I need to understand whether will they be able to do planning and performing the audit procedures? Will they be able to perform the audit procedures or plan the audit procedures appropriately based on my direction? If yes, then whether they will be able to identify or evaluate the evidence gathered. Let's say, for example, they identified some issues. Whether are they capable that much to understand the issues, to discuss the issues with management, and to identify if there is any material misstatement. So, to what extent I need to understand how much reliance I can place upon the internal audit team members who are working with me. Second is the area, or you can say the areas where the assessed risk of material misstatement is higher. So the assessed risk of material misstatement, something is again I need to look into in order. Sorry, assessed risk of material misstatement. My mistake. Assessed risk of material misstatement is something that I need to look into before I can say, okay, I can, just rely or, give area for testing to the to the internal audit function. If the area, or if the, particular, the testing is area where there's a higher risk of material misstatement, I might not give that area for testing to internal audit team. I might give that area to one of my team members. Threat to objectivity and competency. Threat to objectivity and level of competency of internal audit function. That is something again, will help me to understand whether I can give testing or assign testing to the internal audit people or not. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? Okay. If no doubts, then now next question is, in which areas? In which areas? So to what extent, in which area? For that I understood to what extent. Now in which area I can take help of internal audit function for direct assistance. So which are those areas, guys, you think you can take or you cannot take? Come on, quickly. Which are those areas where you think you can take help of internal audit team, or you think you cannot take the direct assistance from internal audit team? Come on, guys, quickly. Always better to prepare a negative list. Let's prepare a negative list. So, which all areas you will not hand over to internal audit team for testing, kind of where you will, not be taking the assistance from internal audit. Which are those areas? Which are those areas, guys? I can say, again, when I say negative list, so I can say the areas where I cannot rely upon the work or I cannot delegate the work to internal audit function is again same line. Areas of testing having uh, or involving significant judgments. For example, estimates. I cannot give testing of estimates to the internal audit team in case of a direct assistance. Reason because testing of estimates requires a lot of professional judgment, significant judgments. In order to validate the judgment, you need to be I will trust someone from my team rather than trusting from internal audit team. Areas of higher assessed risk of material misstatement. Okay, then work related to or where internal audit was involved in past. To avoid the self review thread, I will not be giving work that was earlier or in past has been performed by the internal audit team. Then decisions regarding decisions regarding use of IA, use of IA and its work. That means I cannot give internal audit that responsibility. Okay, you yourself decide whether I should rely upon you or not. Kind of means I am saying to internal audit that okay, you tell me that whether I should rely on you or not, or you plan it for me. Means see how that stupid will be that external auditor is asking internal auditor that you please tell me or explain me or guide me that how much I can rely upon the work that is required to be performed by internal audit, or in case of direct assistance how much I can rely. So decisions regarding those areas should not be given to internal audit. I will be the one, external auditor should be taking those decisions. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? No? Okay. See, whenever I hire someone in my company or in my firm, I do formalities, HR formalities. Okay. Now coming, to one important topic, those HR formalities that I do when I hire someone, okay, are kind of critical in nature and very important in nature. Correct? So, what are those HR formalities generally you people see? Anyone, like, let's say if I have to hire someone, okay, in my company, in my firm, what are the HR formalities generally happens other than interview? Come on, guys, what are those formalities? Anyone? Pretty simple. This is pretty simple. Come on, guys. What are the formalities generally, you complete with the person whom you are going to hire in your company? I say employment agreement, one of the area, correct? Employment agreement. So if I am, having employment agreement, when I hire someone in my organization or firm, why shouldn't be I following the same in case of direct assistance? There also I am taking the help of internal audit team. There also I should have, written agreement. So when I'm taking the direct assistance, I need to have a written agreement and other formalities. So number one is written agreement. Now what should be covered in this agreement? In written agreement, basically I need to cover, okay, that what areas I will be, internal auditing will be performing. Second, that entity will not intervene in the work that will internal audit will perform. Entity will not intervene in work to be performed by internal audit. Third, that internal audit will keep the testing matter, testing or the data and audit files to the extent they have access of. Okay, confidential and will not disclose anyone in the company. Four, IA team will inform stat auditors or external auditors rather threats will inform external auditors threats related to their objectivity. So all these things I will mention in my written agreement. And who will sign this agreement? Who will sign this agreement, guys? Come on, who will sign this agreement? This kind of written agreement, employment agreement with internal audit, who will sign? Come on, quickly. Agreement between whom? Who will sign the agreement? Very good, Mohammed. So, management or authorized representation, representative of management, and second side is external auditors. Okay, they both will sign this particular agreement. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt with respect to the full area that how we need to rely upon the work of internal audit? Any doubt? That how we have to rely upon the work that is performed, that is required to be performed by internal audit? No doubts? If no doubts, then we can proceed to the next topic for today. Okay. The next topic for today is on the similar lines, that is using the work of an auditor's expert. Okay. Using the work of an auditor's expert is something that we need to understand now. That is SA 620. Now the question comes is, before I understand that how and in which situation I can use the work of auditor's expert, first the and prime question that I need to answer is, who is auditor expert? Who are auditors expert? Which people falls under the category of auditor's expert? Can I say internal audit function is an auditor's expert? So who are the auditor's expert then, guys? You have to answer. Okay. Who are the auditor's expert? Can I consider internal audit team as an auditor's expert? Can I consider management as an auditor expert? Who will be part of auditor's expert? Joint auditor will be auditor expert. I'll give you option. You tell me who all you will include in auditor's expert. So, auditors expert. Okay, let's say tax auditor. For example, he is different than external auditor. Internal audit, internal auditor, or you can say joint auditor. Expert hired by management. Branch auditor, or component auditor. These are options. You tell me from these options who is the to whom I can call auditor expert. Who all can be called as an auditor expert? From these, who all can be called as an auditor's expert? From these given options, you tell me who are auditors expert. Come on, guys. From the given option, who all are auditors expert? Good, Mr. Yedugondalu. Very good. Okay, Manoj. Good. Come on, guys, quickly. Who all can be called as an auditor's expert from this list? Come on, guys, quickly. Okay, good, Mr. Yedugondalu. Okay, so expert hired by management for other than accounting and auditing work. Okay, good. Actuarial. Okay, good. Anyone else? Come on, guys, quickly. Who all can be called auditors expert out of these? Okay, so auditors expert. If I had to say, none of them are auditors experts. None. Why? Because the definition of auditor's expert is that we need to understand who are auditor expert. Before I can say I have to rely upon the work or use the work of auditor's expert, it is necessary for me to understand who are. So when I say auditor's expert, I mean to say that an individual or organization that an individual or organization, okay, internal or external, possessing expertise, okay, in field other than audit, other than accounting and auditing, whose work in that field, okay, now whose work in that field is used by auditor. So I am going to use that work in order to obtain or to assist me or to assist, will be used by auditor to assist him in obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Okay. So I am saying an individual or organization, internal or external, possessing expertise in field other than accounting and auditing, whose work in that field is used by the auditor to assist him in obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, then that will be known as an auditor's expert. Now, then what is the difference between management expert? Then who are management expert? Who are management's expert? So when I say management expert, again, management experts means individual or organizations, okay, individuals or organizations, internal or external, so individual or organization, internal or external, possessing expertise in field other than accounting and auditing. Okay, that is similar. Then whose work will be used by not auditor but by entity or management. So I say whose work, sorry, just a minute. Whose work is not used by the auditor but used by the entity. So the difference will be here is the entity. Now we are talking about the entity. Okay. And earlier we were talking about the auditor. But when I say assisting used by the entity to assist him in obtaining sufficient and appropriate evidence, no. To in assist him in preparing the financial statement, because entity will not gather audit evidence. That is auditor's job. Entity's job is to prepare financial statement. So whose work in that field is used by entity for preparing financial statement. Clear? Now the question comes is, can a management expert be a auditor's expert? Can I say Mr. A, who was a management expert, is now auditor's expert too? So let's say Mr. X was hired as management expert by ABC Limited. Now CAW wants to hire Mr. X as auditor's expert on audit of ABC Limited. Can this be done or not? If yes, then how? If not, then why? You tell me, guys. Can I hire same person as an auditor's expert and management expert both? Can I hire both person as an auditor expert or management expert? Come on, guys. What do you think? Can I hire Mr. X as a management expert and auditor's expert both or not? Are you getting my point? Are you getting my question? So can I hire Mr. X as a management expert and auditor expert both? So management is also hiring that person and auditor is also hiring that person. Can I do that?
Playing from Harshad PC.
Any idea? Any answers? Can I do that or not? Can I do that or not, guys? Come on. What do you think? Can I hire same person as an auditor's expert plus management expert? Okay. Okay, Salesh, good. Good, Yedu Onalu. I cannot. Simply, I cannot. No. Reason because of self review threat. Because let's say, for example, as a management expert, he was preparing financial statement. When I will hire auditor him as an auditor expert, he will review his own work. So because of self-review threat, I cannot hire same person as an expert, management expert plus auditor's expert. Okay. Now the question, very good question, Charu, that if I say self-review thread over here in this scenario, why we allow internal audit, won't it be a self-review thread? Why we allow internal audit? Okay, to provide direct assistance. See, in internal audit, there were two scenarios. Scenario number one, proposal one was that was a work that was performed by internal audit independently. There was no issue that they were not doing any other work. They were only performing the work independently and then we were reviewing the work. That was proposal one. IA perform work independently. Okay. And external auditor review the work. So there is no chance of self-review because IA is not reviewing their work. In proposal 2, that is direct assistance, there were chances of self-review threat. Okay. But when I discussed about, direct assistance, I specifically said the areas that I will not give to internal auditor. Okay. If I talk about negative list, I specifically said where work related or where IA was involved in the past. This is to avoid self-review threat. This is to avoid self-review threat. So in internal audit also we saw that okay, to avoid self-review threat, I will not give work related to or where IA was involved in past. Same way here also it will be not feasible for me to appoint same person as a management or as an expert or auditor's expert because that will be high chances of self-review threat. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? I cannot. Any doubt, guys? Okay. If no doubts, then let's take a quick 10-minute break. After the break, we'll gather back and continue the session. Okay. Let's take quick 10-minute break. Hello everyone, welcome back. Let's continue the session. So we were discussing about, when using the work of an auditor's expert, and we understood who's the auditor's expert. Now, now before we deep dive further, first let's understand what is the role of auditor over here. Role of the external auditor. Before I use the work of an auditor's expert, what I need to do. So before I can use the work of auditor's expert, what I need to do, that is something I need to understand. So kind of objective of the auditor, with respect to work of auditor's expert, same way, the way I saw an internal audit on the similar line to determine whether to use the work of auditor's expert. Let's say, for example, in internal audit, we had, okay, let's determine whether to accept the proposal of the management or not. On the similar lines over here, whether to use the work of auditor's expert, question mark. That is the first objective. Second, I need to understand if I'm using, if yes to the number one, if yes, okay, if I'm using the work of auditor's expert, then to determine whether sorry, apology. Okay, to determine whether that work is adequate for external. I will not use the term external auditor over here because there is only one auditor we are talking, that is the external auditor. So I'll just use the word educate for the auditor's purpose. And whenever I use auditor over here in SA 620, that is by default external auditor. So I will not write external everywhere, external auditor's expert. Okay, that will be written, repeating the word without any just meaning, and because we are talking about external auditor over here. Okay. So these are the two things that I need to understand. Whether to use, if yes, then whether the work of auditor's expert is adequate for me or not. Now, whether to use is something dependent upon the nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures that will be performed by the auditor's expert. Okay. So I need to understand whether like in order to assess whether I need the auditor's expert work, I need to assess where I will be using that. So the first one, whether to use, will depend upon the work, whether to use the auditor's expert, that will directly dependent upon, okay, the nature, timing, and extent, that is NTE, of audit procedures nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedure with respect to which, okay, I will be using the work of auditor's expert. So nature, timing, and audit procedures where the expert's work will be used. For example, if I give you, some areas or matters in this, like for example, nature of area to which auditors experts work relates to. For example, if I give you, let's say, valuation of uh, some, uh, precious metal or stones, some precious stone or ancient artifacts. Okay, because the company is dealing into a company is running museums. So for their inventory purpose, they need to value the ancient artifacts. And kind of example is that where a person can value or find out the value of the ancient artifacts which are kept inside the museum. Number two, risk of material misstatement. Okay, related to that area, related to auditors, expert area, that how much risk is there, risk of material misstatement, and how it relates to, whether the auditor's expert will be able to gather that evidence compared to the risk that is there. Third, significance of the work, okay, in relation to whole audit, in relation to audit. So let's say, for example, I'll take this example only. I say valuation of ancient artifacts which are kept in the museum is a major portion of my audit work, because it's in the it's a very big amount. Company is having huge inventory of artifacts, and the company runs, it's a asset for the company, kind of, based on which the company is running its business. So the significance of the work in relation to the audit. Auditor's knowledge and experience with expert. Okay, so if the auditor has worked with the expert, okay, or if the auditor has a knowledge of, working with that expert, someone else might have worked with, then that knowledge also is helpful, that how and whether I should appoint and use the work of that expert or not, whether expert is subject to the auditors firms quality control policies and procedures. Quality control policies and procedures. So basically, these are the policies and procedures we draft during SQC1. Remember, we discussed during SQC1 whether the expert is subject to these policies and procedures or not. This gives me a comfort whether the expert will be able to maintain the quality in his work or not. Second, before I appoint auditor's expert, I need to evaluate one more area. That is, I need to understand competency, capability, okay, or capabilities, and the objectivity of auditor. So competency, capability, and objectivity of the auditor is something that is very important and required to be understood over here. Because if I am hiring an auditor over here, okay, if I'm hiring an auditor's expert over here, I need to understand that, okay, whether that auditor has that much competency, expert has that much competency, capability, objectivity. Okay. Then what I need to understand is field of expertise, for which I need auditor's expert. Field of expertise. Like I should have some understanding about field of expertise. Okay. So that I can define the scope, objective of the expert's work. If I don't know anything about the field of expertise, then how will I explain to the expert that what I need from him? So I need to have the understanding of the field of expertise over here, some understanding, basic understanding, in order to enable me as an auditor to determine the nature, scope, and objectives of the expert work, plus to judge whether the expert work will be sufficient or not. Field of expertise and its understanding. All these things will determine whether I need to say yes to use the work of auditor's expert or not. If I say yes, again, if I say yes, then what? Then if I say yes, then I need to understand few things more. Okay. If yes to auditor's expert, then what I need to do is I need to first of all do an agreement. Okay. Agreement in writing with auditor's expert. So I need to create an agreement in writing with the auditor's expert, okay, which shall include which shall include matters regarding nature, scope, and objective of auditor's expert. Then roles and responsibilities. What are the roles and responsibilities of auditor's expert and of auditor? Both. If I have to provide some data, then it will be my responsibility. Nature, timing, extent of communication between auditor and expert. That how frequently he will communicate with me with respect to open matters, his conclusions, testing, or his work. Confidentiality requirements. That the expert has to adhere to these confidentiality requirements. So I'll create an agreement in writing with the auditor's expert, which shall include these areas. If I say yes, after understanding whether to use the whether to use the auditor's expert work or not. Any doubts? Any doubt, guys? No doubts? Okay. So once I decide, okay, I need to use the work of auditor's expert, I decide I have to create an agreement in writing. I will assign the work to him. Now comes the second part. To understand whether the work is adequate for the auditor's purpose. Now, whatsoever he has performed, whether that work is adequate for me. First, I decided I need to use the work. Now, I am thinking, I am discussing the part where the expert has performed the work. Expert has performed the work, but I need to understand whether that work is sufficient. So, evaluating the adequacy of the auditor's work. Evaluating the adequacy of auditor's work. Okay. Now, how you will evaluate the auditor's work? Auditor's expert work. My mistake. I am not. I keep repeating auditor's work. It's the auditor's expert work. Okay. So, how will you evaluate the auditor's expert's work? Okay. How will you evaluate? Now, if you want to see whether the work is adequate or not, how will you do that? What you will see? Can anyone give me some examples that this is the thing that you will see to ensure that the adequacy of the auditor's work is appropriate, or the auditor's work is adequate for me, for my testing, for my audit? So, what are those areas that you will see? Come on, guys. So, again, I'm repeating what things you will look into or what things you will see when you have to decide whether the work of auditor's expert is adequate for the purpose of my audit. I want quick answers. Come on, guys, quickly. He has to follow the audit procedure properly and whether he has followed the nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures. Okay. how nature, timing, and extent here. Like nature, timing, and extent is something kind of is used when we are talking about the planning and you know when it comes to performance. It's like agreed audit procedures. Inquiry, observation, obtaining audit evidence. Good, Mr. Kondalu. Good. Good, Charu. Very good. What else? Whether satisfying the requirement of sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Very good. Very good, Mohammed. What else? See, I'll tell you. Whenever you want to evaluate the work of auditors expert, okay, in a simple terms, whenever you want to anyone's work, evaluate anyone's work, not only the expert, but anyone, start from the beginning. For example, let's say he has performed the work. I'm talking about performance of the work. Okay. Performance of the work, not deciding whether which work to perform. Both are different. Deciding whether which work to perform and the work which has been performed. I am reviewing the work which has been performed. So number one, I need to understand, okay, whenever anyone performs a work, so I need to understand the use of source data based on which the work has been performed. Okay. Source data, its relevance, completeness, and accuracy. Okay, of that source data. The starting point of any testing is your data. So first, I will understand whether the data is appropriate or not. Whether the source data that has been used is appropriate or not. Okay. Then number two, after source data, what I will do? They will take some assumptions, method to test. Okay. I need to understand or evaluate the assumptions and methods adopted by auditors expert, including their reasonable relevance, reasonableness, okay. So assumptions and methods are something which are used across each and every testing. Okay. Let's say I use the method of sampling. I took 250 samples. Now, what is the relevance? Whether the sampling, let's say, for example, bank confirmation. If I use sampling in bank confirmation, is it relevant? Answer is no. Reasonableness. Let's say the population size is in thousands, and I'm testing only 5 samples. Is it reasonable? Answer is no. So the assumptions and method which are used by the auditor's expert adopted by him and the relevance and the reasonableness in the given circumstances, something that I need to understand. After relevance, after assumptions and method, he will perform the work. He might be, doing some work and testing or whatsoever he has done. and he will come up with the findings and audit evidence. So I need to understand, okay, I need to evaluate the relevance and the reasonableness. Again, same relevance and reasonableness of expert's finding. What was his finding after doing everything? What is finding or conclusions he has reached upon? So finding or conclusions, then I will understand. Once I will have the conclusions or findings in my hand, I will compare that with the other audit evidence. So evaluating consistency of conclusions with other audit evidence. If I have any other audit evidence, I will compare the consistency of the conclusion. Okay. So I started with the source data. I went to the assumptions and method. I came to the conclusion and then matching with the other audit evidence. This is the way I will evaluate the work of the evaluate the adequacy of the work. Any doubt with respect to this? Any doubt? No? No doubt? Okay, if no doubts, then I want to talk about one important aspect, that is reporting, but how to report the work that is performed by the expert. So let's say I give you a paragraph in the audit report. Okay, this is a paragraph in audit report, basically other matter paragraph. Okay, other matter paragraph. Now, this is a paragraph that is there in the audit report, and we need to understand this paragraph that has been written. Okay, in the audit report. So we have audited the financial statements for the period ending 31st March 2023, which contained valuations of, let's say, we'll take example of ancient artifacts. In ancient artifacts, ancient artifacts, which were material for the company. We hired or we obtained a valuation report from expert appointed by us, and we have relied upon the report submitted by that expert. No other procedures were performed by us, and our report is not modified. Our opinion, rather, is not modified in this respect. in this matter. So let's say something, kind of this paragraph is there. We have audited the financial statement for the period ending this, which contained valuation of ancient artifacts, which were material for the company. Okay. Sorry. There is a spelling mistake. Ancient artifacts which were material for the company. We obtained a valuation report from expert appointed by us, and we have relied upon the report submitted by expert. No other procedures were performed by us, and our opinion is not modified in this matter. Okay. So a kind of reliance which has been placed, okay, on that particular expert's valuation report. This is a paragraph in the audit report. Now, you tell me whether this paragraph is appropriate in the given circumstances. Do you think this paragraph is appropriate or not? Other matter paragraph in audit report. Do you think this paragraph is appropriate? Or there is some issue in this paragraph? What do you think, guys? Whether this paragraph is appropriate? If not, then why? What is the problem here? What is the problem here, Nalu? Like, why do you think this is not appropriate? Good, very good, Mohammed. Very good. See, in this paragraph, I am saying I am not responsible. Okay. Means I have relied upon the work that is submitted by I relied upon the report submitted by the expert. We have relied upon the report that is submitted by expert. And no other procedures have been performed this particular area. No other procedures were performed. That is issue, very big issue. Because I need to make sure that external auditor or auditor need to make sure that the work of expert is adequate. I need to make sure that the work of expert is adequate. If I make sure that, then how can I say I have not performed any other procedures? Correct, Manoj. Correct, Charu. So, if I say that, my work, if the work that is performed by expert, I have not verified, then there is an issue at my hand because I was supposed to verify the work and its adequacy. And if I do this, then why to mention this? If I am performing some procedures to make, to verify the adequacy, then how can I say I am not responsible? So, the meaning of this line that we have relied upon the report means auditor is not responsible for valuation or expert hired. That is not appropriate. I am saying I am not responsible for the valuation or expert hired. How it could be? If I have to perform the procedures for the ensuring adequacy, means I am responsible, and that's why on these two grounds this particular paragraph is incorrect. And from this, I could conclude that when we are reporting in the audit, when we are with respect to the reporting of audit work in audit report. Okay. So mentioning auditors, experts work in audit report. So what I meant to say with this example is that the auditor shall not refer to the work of auditor's expert. The auditor shall not refer the work of an expert in audit report. In audit report, unless required by law. So there is an exception. Exception to this is number one, required by law to mention the name and the work. Number two, if there is modification in audit report. Let's say expert did a valuation which is much lesser than the company's valuation. Okay, there is a modification, there's a misstatement, and because of which I have to mention the name and reference. But having said that, mentioning the auditor's experts work will not reduce the responsibility of auditor. Means, in case if, let's say, for example, I'm required to mention or refer the work that is performed by expert, still my responsibility will not get reduced. I will be responsible for the audit opinion. Okay. So I need to mention this, that auditor's responsibility will not get reduced even after mentioning the reference to the expert's work. So auditor is responsible for the audit opinion. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt, guys, with respect to using the work of auditor's expert? Any doubt? Any doubt? No? Okay. If no further doubts, then let us see if we can, take some questions and then we can move forward. Just a minute. Okay. Let us see one example and then we'll continue. Remember yesterday we took one example wherein there was a company Super Products Limited. So there is a company Super Products Limited, a listed company invested 500 crores on 1/4/22 in Tricycle Technology Limited and acquired 35% equity through superior voting rights. Okay, under investment agreement and everything. So TTL SPL appointed Sudha and Associate as their statutory auditor. SPL is the Super Products, and TTL appointed Shubhan and Company as their statutory auditors. Now, in continuation to that question only, Super Products Limited appointed Borderline Advisories as their internal auditors. Borderline Advisory Audit team comprised of individuals who held diplomas in internal audit from New World University. However, none of them were chartered accountant or member of institute. Okay. During FY 22-23, the following areas, BLA chose the following areas for testing the internal controls and design and operating effectiveness. Okay. Now, number one, vendor reconciliations are there, revenue recognition from long-term contracts, manual journal entries, and manual journal reconciliations. Fine. Okay. So these four areas are there. Now, the question is, assume SPL also hired BLA to assist management in calculating the impact of the following areas. Means they are internal auditors, but they are also helping management in calculating the impact of following areas. Okay. Which are the following areas? That is first time adoption of Ind AS 116, identification of initial recognition of transaction falling within the scope of Ind AS 109, and calculation of fair value liabilities as per Ind AS. Just a minute. Yeah. Calculation of liabilities, fair value liabilities as per Ind AS 113. Now, instead of providing fees to BLA, SPL issued equity shares at a price lower than the market value with a lock-in period of 1 year on it. Kindly guide Sudha and Associate when they intend to rely upon the work performed by internal auditor for the purpose of audit. Also provide factors that can affect the internal auditor's objectivity. So, again, understand. So, SPLA appointed BLA as their internal auditors. They tested these areas: vendor reconciliation, revenue recognition, manual journal entry, and manual journal reconciliation. Now, BLA also assisted management in calculating the impact of following areas on financial statement. So they were kindly also kind of management expert. And which were those areas? Those areas are first time adoption, Ind AS, identification of initial recognition of transactions falling within the scope of Ind AS 109, calculation of fair value of liabilities as per Ind AS 113. And instead of issuing payments, SPL issued equity shares at a price lower than the market value with a lock-in period of 1 year on it. Now you need to guide, you as a Sudha and Associate, this statutory auditor, external auditor, have to guide or have to decide whether you can use or rely upon the work performed by the internal auditor for audit purpose. If yes, okay, then what are the factors that will affect the internal auditor's objectivity? So this is the question. Simple. Can you rely upon the work or can you intend to rely, can you plan that you will rely upon the work performed by internal auditor for the purpose of audit in the current scenario? Come on, guys. What do you think? Can you rely upon the work performed by internal auditor or not? Come on, quickly. Now we are into the practical scenarios. We need to see how the things which we understood are applied practically. We need to see how the things which are, part of, these standards are applied practically over here. Come on, guys. Can you rely or not? Important question. Yes, no, good Mohammed. Self-interest threat exists. Auditor can rely subject to the condition that the auditor has sufficient proof that IA has discharged its duties without any bias. Mr. Yedukunalu, no threat to self-interest. Okay, good. What else? Self-interest threat is affecting here. Okay. Anything else? What else is there? Why I shouldn't be relying upon the work performed by internal auditors? Why I shouldn't be relying upon the work that is performed by internal auditors? Self-review threat and objectivity. Okay. If threat to objectivity, good. I am not sure why you guys are not focusing on this particular line. There is something with this also. What is the requirement? Remember when I was discussing with respect to the internal auditor, I discussed something that I need to understand whether I can rely. And to say that whether I can rely or not, I need to see three things: organizational status, relevant policies, that's supposed objectivity. So objectivity is the one area you have already highlighted. Level of competency. Again, level of competency of internal audit function. Now that is a very, very important point, level of competency. So based on this, I need to ensure, I need to evaluate the competency of internal audit function, because remember I said with respect to the competency, the only requirement, only exception will be if he is a chartered accountant in practice. Okay. If they are chartered accountant in practice, then I can say, okay, no need to evaluate the competency, but they are not the member of institute. Correct, Mohammed. Very good. So I need to see the competency plus this results in self-review thread, and this results equity share at the lower market value results issue with objectivity. So if you see the answer, that as per SA 610, using the work of internal auditors, the external auditor shall determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used for the purpose of audit by evaluating the extent to which the internal audit function's organizational status, relevant policies and procedures suppose the objectivity of the internal auditors. The external auditor shall not use the work of internal audit function if the external auditor determines that the function's organizational status, relevant policies and procedures do not adequately support the objectivity of internal auditor. The second part of the question was also provide factors which can affect the internal auditor's objectivity. So the factors which can affect the internal auditor's objectivity are whether organizational status of internal audit function, including the function's authority, accountability, supports the ability of the function to free from bias, conflict of interest, undue influence of others to override the professional judgment. Okay. Second, whether the internal audit function is free from any conflicting responsibilities, like we saw just now, of helping management. Like for example, having managerial or operational duties or responsibilities that are outside the internal audit function. Whether those charged with governance oversee employment decision related to the internal audit function. Whether there are any constraints or restrictions placed on the internal audit function by management or those charged with governance. Okay. Whether the internal audits are member of relevant professional bodies and their membership obligate their compliance with relevant professional standards relating to objectivity, and whether their internal policies have achieved the same objectives. So we also saw this one also. So this competency plus objectivity, because they are not member of any professional body as of now. Okay, so there is a chance that they are not complying with any of the professional standards. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt, guys? Did you understand the question? Okay. If no doubts, we can then proceed further. So there is one simple question. Okay, next one is a higher level of competency of the internal audit function can compensate for organizational status and policies and procedures that do not adequately support objectivity of the internal auditor. Okay. Auditors for external auditor who intend to rely upon the work performed by internal auditor. Again, the question is a high level of competency of internal audit function can compensate for organizational status and policies and procedures that do not adequately support the objectivity of internal auditors. So whether it is true, if yes, then okay, fine. If not, then why don't you think it's not true? So high level of competency compensate for objectivity, whether true or false, kind of. High level of competency of internal audit function compensate for objectivity of the internal audit, true or false, kind of. So I want with reason. You need to provide with reason why you think it's true or false with reason. Do you think the high level of competency of internal audit function can compensate the objectivity? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, simple question. Straightforward, simple question. What do you think? True, false, with reason. Why do you think, you know, a high level of competency of the internal audit function can compensate for organizational status, policies, procedures that do not adequately support the objectivity of internal audit? Come on, guys, quickly.
Playing from Harshad PC.
Sorry, just a minute. What do you think? Whether it supports? No, then why? I want with reason. Why do you think it's yes or no? With reason. Come on, guys, quickly. Very good, Charu. Very good, Mohammed. So, objectivity is equally required as a competency. Excess of one cannot be compensated by, excess of one cannot be used as a compensating factor for the other. Okay. So, the level of competency I require, the same level of objectivity I also require. It's not either or situation, it's and situation. I need both of the things at the same time, for the proper at the proper requirement. If that is not available, then it's a problem for me. Understood? So it's not an or situation. I need both. Both are required. And required throughout the audit. It is not like that, okay, now I have objectivity, later I will have competency. No, no. Throughout the audit, from start to end, I require objectivity and competency both. Okay, clear? Any doubt? Let's see one more question. Sudha and associate decided to use the work or testing performed by internal auditors over design and effectiveness of manual journal entries. As per the information gathered, BLA tested 50 samples of manual journal entries and found no deviation in any attribute. Hence, Sudha and associate decided not to perform further testing on manual journal entries as internal auditors have already performed sufficient testing on them. Kindly comment. So, okay, there is one now. The competency in case of auditors expert. When I say competency, for example, whether they are that much competent to perform the internal audit, qualifications, their experience, their team size, a lot of factors are there which together decide whether they are competent or not. For example, team size. They are auditing a company which is of 10,000, 20,000 crore turnover, but the internal audit team size is 3. Or let's say, for example, all are freshers in an oil and gas industry company. They don't have any knowledge of the oil and gas industry. Plus, let's say, for example, they don't have any experience. Everyone is fresher. So, experience, qualification, team size, timing, a lot of things are there. Resources they have to perform the audit, internal audit. A lot of things are there which are required to be considered when we are considering the competency of the internal audit function. Coming back to this question, so then associated decided to use the work or testing performed by internal auditors over manual journal entries. BLA tested 50 samples of manual journal entries and found no deviation. So Sudan Associated decided not to perform further testing on manual journal entries. What do you think? Comment on this. What do you think about this? Is this correct or not? Is it correct or not? Do you think this is correct? Now, BLA has already tested 50 samples of manual journal entry. Whether further testing is required? Okay, Mohammed, good. Okay, Adha Palaka, good. Okay, now answering this question, whenever you answer a question, you need to mention the essay with the number. Okay, which essay you will mention over here? When you are answering a question, you have to mention the essay number also. So which essay you will mention over here, and what is your answer in this scenario? Do you think this is appropriate? Come on, guys, quickly. Do you think this is appropriate? Okay, Mohammed. Good, very good. What else? Which one you will mention over here? Other than this, which one? Come on, guys. This could be a question in exam that okay, this particular testing was done by the internal audit function. Now, external audit want to rely upon the work that is performed by internal audit. Internal audit tested this much samples. This is the real life. Internal audit test this much amount. They give you the detail. Okay, what testing we have performed. Now it's your turn to decide whether to rely or not. If you want to rely, and if you say, okay, for example, in this scenario, they relied, they say, fine, no further testing required. What you would have done if you would have on this place, in the place of Sudan Associates? Think from that point of view. Think that now you are an auditor. Now you are on the place of Sudan Associate. Sudan Associate, relied upon the work of internal audit in this scenario. Okay, on this particular testing with this particular samples. What you would have done? Is it your name Usha? So fine if I call Usha. Okay. Very good, Usha. That's the correct answer. Good, Mohammed. Very good. Okay. Thank you, Usha. So most of you have already mentioned that you will quote in answer essay 610. That is correct. That is fine. Someone mentioned, Mohammed mentioned about essay 530 sampling. Okay, that is good. Sampling. What else? We will see the relevance and completeness of and accuracy of the source data, relevance and reasonableness of the assumptions and method, or of auditor's finding, internal auditor's finding. Okay, good, very good, good, Charu. Okay, let me talk about one more thing that we have already discussed. How many of you remember essay 240? How many of you remember essay 240? Essay 240, how many of you remember? Remember something in essay 240 we discussed about auditor's responsibility with related to fraud, and in that we talked about presumed risk of fraud, and one of such presumed risk was risk of management override of controls, wherein we discussed no, we need to test, the auditor has to test appropriateness of the journal entries and other adjustment. This is mandatory. This is mandatory for auditor to test journal entries. We cannot delegate this area to internal audit. In this case, we have delegated to this area to internal audit. We are saying we will not perform any further procedures. But there is a presumed risk of fraud. So this particular area, manual journal entries, okay, this is presumed risk of fraud, which is equal to significant risk, high risk, or whatever you say, okay, key risk, or it's a significant risk, high risk areas, manual journal entries, okay, because of management override of controls. Now, if this is a scenario, then in that case, that becomes mandatory for me to test this area. Number one, I cannot say that, we decided not to perform. Sorry. I cannot say that we decided not to perform further testing. That is incorrect because I'm not following SA 240. Considering the fraud risk, I need to perform some testing. Plus, SA 610 says that when the area or negative list higher assessed risk of material misstatement at assertion level, this one, at that particular point in time, I should not give this area to the internal auditor. Remember in which area? I said we have a negative list which should not be used, where internal audit should not be used. I'm talking about higher risk of material misstatement. In other words, significant risk, fraud risk, or any other higher risk of material misstatement area, including revenue and manual journal entries or management override of controls, because those are higher the assessed risk of material misstatement in those areas. So in the current question, I am giving a higher area with a higher risk of material misstatement. This area, manual journal entry, is higher risk of material misstatement. This area contains higher risk of material misstatement and hence should not be given to IA. So I will mention, instead of 530, I will mention SA 610 plus I will mention SA 240. 240 says what is the responsibility of an auditor in case of a fraud risk. From there, I will come to 610. I will say, okay, now that was the responsibility of auditor, or how auditor is, completing his responsibility, and whether he should rely upon the internal auditor or not. So 240 and 610. Any doubt? Any doubt, guys? Any doubt? So it's not like that, you can apply only one standard in one question. No. See holistically, questions might be related to multiple standards. And rather than standards, understand logically. Audit is based on risk. Where there's a higher risk, the higher audit evidence is by default required. So whenever you see a question where it talks about lower audit evidence, you have to click like, okay, no, this is incorrect because this is the higher risk area. I need a higher audit evidence. The way it was there in the manual journal entry, higher risk area. 50 samples done by internal auditor and external auditor saying that I will not do anything. It's literally not appropriate because of the higher risk, fraud risk. External auditor has to perform some procedures, has to gather audit evidence. I cannot rely upon the work performed by internal auditor. I'm saying that will be equivalent to, I'm saying, okay, there was a fraud risk. I took a management representation letter. Okay. Management gave me a representation that there is no fraud risk. I'm fine with that. My audit evidence is sufficient. That is equivalent to that. So when I rely upon only internal auditor in case of fraud risk, that will be a big mistake that the external auditor will be doing. It will be similar to taking written representation from management for fraud risk. See, there is no requirement of for internal auditor to be a chartered accountant or member of any professional body, but that is something plays an important role when we are evaluating the competency of the internal auditor. Let's say if internal auditor is a member of institute, I cannot question the competency of the internal auditor because he has passed the exam that is conducted by the institute. He is of the same level as the other auditors are. If he is a member of any other professional body, then I only need to see whether that professional body is, having some standards or ethical requirement, independence requirement, which is applicable to the internal auditor. Okay. But if none of the case is there, internal auditor is neither a chartered accountant nor any member of professional body, in that case, I need to evaluate the competency because he is not subject to any independence requirement, any objectivity or any CPE requirements, continuous professional education kind of. In that case, whether the internal auditor competent enough to perform the procedures that I need to evaluate. So it's not mandatory for the internal auditor to be a chartered accountant or a member of professional institute, but that plays an important role when external auditor has to evaluate the competency of internal auditor. Any doubt? No. Auditors expert and internal auditor are not same. No. Internal auditor is different. Auditors expert is different. Auditors expert is something appointed by auditor. They work based on the scope, objectives, responsibilities decided by the auditor. They are independent of management in all respect. And they are appointed for the field other than accounting and auditing. When I talk about auditors expert. But when I talk about internal auditor is being appointed by management. They work for the management. They are not same. In both of the cases, I need to evaluate competency. When I'm hiring an external, auditors expert, I need to evaluate competency of that expert. When I'm using the work of internal audit, I need to evaluate the competency of internal audit also. Any doubt, guys? Any doubt? I hope I have provided answer to your question, Charu. Any further doubt, Charu, on this? Okay. Auditors expert with example, competency of auditors expert. See, let's say hypothetical example. Okay. Now, let's say Mr. X, okay, is being appointed as auditors expert for valuation of ancient artifacts, or you can take it precious gemstones. Okay, kind of. He is being appointed as an auditor expert for valuation of ancient artifacts or precious gemstone by ABC and Company. Okay, statutory auditors. Stat auditors of MNO Limited. Okay. Now, when I will decide to appoint Mr. X as an expert, okay, I need to see his qualifications. Let's say, for example, Mr. X is recently or has recently graduated from Government College of Commerce. Okay, Mr. X has recently graduated from Government College of Commerce. Okay, and has no prior experience or qualification other than this. Last year, management hired Mr. Y, who was having 20 years of experience in valuations, along with kind of PhD in doctorate in archaeological valuations or archaeological findings. Logical archaeological valuations. Now see the competency and the level of difference between both of the experts. One is Government College of Commerce graduate with no prior experience, that is the current year. Last year was 20 years experience with archaeological valuation. With whom you will be comfortable more? You might appoint, the second one compared to the first one. Okay. Last year management appointed this person, but this time you are appointing this person. With whom you will be more comfortable? Y or X? You will rely upon more on Y or Mr. X. I give you two options. Okay. Either appoint Mr. X or either appoint Mr. Y. 99, not even 99, but I'm sure 100% you will go Mr. Y. Why? Because you see that the competency of Mr. Y is higher and more compared to Mr. X. Because Mr. X is only a graduate fresher. He doesn't have any experience in the valuation. But you are evaluating. So when you are comparing X and Y, you are evaluating their competency basically. You are not doing something else. You are evaluating their competency. One is, having such an experience. He is a PhD in archaeological valuations. He has done so much of work. Mr. X, on the other hand, he's a fresher, a graduate from Government College of Commerce in Commerce. Even that raises a question whether he will be able to perform the particular task. So you are evaluating the competency of the experts, and on the basis of that, you will take a decision whether to appoint the expert, whether to use the expert or not. Yes, management and auditor expert cannot be same. Totally agree, Mohammed. In that case, you need to find someone who should have an equivalent experience as Mr. Y has, or qualification and background as Mr. Y has, rather than going with Mr. X. See, that is, Charu, again, very hypothetical example if there is only one option available. In real life, in a practical scenario, you will get tens of options available, thousands of options available with respect to this. So I hardly have seen any area where, I only have one expert. But if I have a one expert, rather than appointing that expert, I will say there is a limitation on the scope of audit. Because I cannot do the, valuation. I'm not the expert in valuing the ancient artifacts. On the similar hand, on the same side, I don't have a expert on which I can rely upon. So I will call that situation as a limitation on the scope of audit. Any further doubts, guys? Any further doubts? Any doubts? Clear pretty much? Okay. If no further doubts, then guys, we'll keep our session till here. Okay, in the next session, we'll continue with the chapter 4. Also, please revise whatever we have discussed, whatever we have, completed till now, and be ready with the chapter 4's content in the next lecture. We will be discussing in detail chapter 4. Okay. So thank you guys. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in the next lecture. Ashok, is session concluded? Thank you.